Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, a few minutes later than usual, on the banks of the Liverpool-Leeds Canal here in East Lancashire. It's a little cooler than it has been over the last few days, but there's a little bit of wind, and unfortunately I don't have my mufflers with me, so hopefully the wind noise isn't going to be too distracting. Well, it's the morning of Thursday, the 10th of May 2018. The title of this morning's broadcast is Fracked or Fried? How would you like your cancer? And people, fortunately, are actually starting to join the dots for themselves. And over the last 5+ years now, the anti-fracking community has absolutely got it that the chemicals that are used in the fracking process are carcinogenic, or include carcinogenic chemicals. And it is well established now that wherever this industry establishes its presence, then there is a marked increase in the negative health impact, and in particular the rise in cancers, in birth defects, in spontaneous abortion. And yet, of course, this is just anecdotal. Well, it's not, of course, is it? Because an increasing number of academic papers have been written to research this situation, which are of course all denied by the industry. No, must have it wrong. Nothing at all to do with the fracking process. And the fact that these negative health impacts weren't measured or measurable even prior to the arrival of the industry, they still deny that it's just pure coincidence that these rises happen to coincide with their arrival. So a very large number of people now, particularly in the north of England and in those pockets in the south which are being targeted for unconventional gas exploitation, those people get it, and they are mounting increasingly active campaigns to prevent the unconventional gas industry from establishing a presence in their area. Now, sadly, there is still a lot of NIMBYism, but yeah, I understand that. Whilst it's somebody else's problem, get on with your life. But if this kicks off, then obviously it's going to be the problem for some 15 to 20 million people in the north of England, and 75 million people in the south of England will live within 100 miles of a fracked unconventional hydrocarbons well. So it's going to pretty much affect a significant chunk of the population. But if we thought that fracking was limited to the north of England and a few pockets in the south, then people need to look at the potential impact of the 5G rollout, because this is going to impact everybody. And whereas fracking primarily is going to impact on people who live in the more rural areas, because the urban areas are effectively off limits to the unconventional gas industry. And if the North Yorkshire Minerals and Waste Plan template is adopted elsewhere, then it would mean that there's a 500-metre buffer zone between residences and a gas well. But with 5G, this is going to be rolled out in the first instance in urban areas. And as I've now been discussing for almost 2 months, the tree culling in Sheffield is a precursor to the rollout of 5G, because the University of Surrey and their Centre of 5G Excellence, where they're working with the telecoms industry, in their white paper in section 3.1, it spells out that the biggest threat to the effectiveness of the 5G telecom system, the microwave telecom system, is the presence of trees with foliage, and trees with foliage and water drops on them are might as well be a complete block. Which is why now obviously British or Network Rail are also in the process of culling millions of trees around the country, having stated that they're going to move the cutback point to, I think it's 5 meters, whereas it was sort of 3.5 meters or so. So any tree that is within 5 meters of the railway track is now under threat. And it does seem that somebody just isn't doing their homework, because the trees were planted by the Victorian engineers when they were building the embankments and digging out the cuttings these trees were planted, one as a shield, two obviously as an environmental buffer to the steam locomotives of the time, but also to provide the roots network to hold, that's ROOT, the root network, to actually keep the embankment and the cutting from collapsing. And now they're going to be cutting them back. Why? Because they need 5G, the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things, where everything, and I mean everything, and everyone has an IP address. And you know, that total surveillance system can be rolled out. But the 5G network isn't just 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, and next step. It is a completely different technology. It is a military-grade technology. It is untried in the civilian environment. In fact, Mark Steele, who is an engineer and an inventor, and his speciality is light frequencies and in heads-up displays. And he makes the observation that you know, one of the primary causes of young servicemen suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and you know, self-harming, committing suicide, unable to function in civilian life, is not just related to the horrendous experiences that they have on the battlefield, which of course military personnel have had for time immemorial, but it's also related to the fact that they are exposed to battlefield technology, microwave battlefield interrogation, and the impact that these microwaves have on their neural processes. Effectively, it screws them up. It scrambles the brain. But nobody wants to address this because, you know, this technology is used in a battlefield where there's no regulatory control. It's an experimental area. Oops, insects flying around it. An experimental area, you know, for these technologies, and there's no oversight. There's no precautionary principle. It's whatever you think you need to do to get one up over your opponents. Well, this technology is now being rolled out into the civilian world, and once again, without any real oversight, without any real testing, the technologists, the technocrats, simply want to roll this out, and to hell with the consequences. Well, it is going to impact massively, because the frequency ranges here are literally going to fry your brain. And you know, like all things, it's not necessarily everybody that's affected. And if you look at the scientific studies that have done on the effects of EMF, even just from a normal phone on the brain of young children versus the adult, there's a massive difference. Even holding the phone, you know, 1 inch or 2 inches away from your head makes a massive difference. And that's with the lower frequencies of 3G, 4G. Once we get into the microwave area, then it's a completely different entity. Coupled with which, you know, my nearest phone masts right now are some few hundred meters away. With 5G, then the range of the mast to the receiver is, the effective range is much less, which is why these 5G transmitter receivers have to literally be every few hundred, or every 100 meters or so. That's why they're putting them on street lamps. They're going to put them on road signs, on telegraph poles, and because it needs clear line of sight, that's why they have to remove the trees. And I know in Sheffield there are tree activist groups that are still in absolute denial about the link with 5G, despite the academic papers that are out there, and particularly the University of Surrey. In fact, a PhD environmentalist contacted me a few days ago and said, "Ian, I haven't seen any evidence of the link between 5G and the culling of trees." And I said, "Well, you know, come on, you're a PhD, you can do a little bit of research." But I helped them out by sending them a few links, and the response was, "Oh, well, I'll get around to reading it at some point." Well, you know, I acknowledge that some people are just not going to have the time, even if they have an inclination. And this is exactly, of course, what the establishment relies upon. It relies upon people just getting on with their lives and not actually looking at what's occurring here. And, you know, already where the double whammy in Gateshead of the LED lamps and the frequencies from these LED streetlights are already having an impact on the communities where they've been rolled out. And guess what? It's not in the wealthiest areas of Gateshead where they're doing these tests. And it's causing nosebleeds, sleeplessness, headaches, and according to Mark Steele, spontaneous near-term abortion. So much so that the Gateshead Council ran an article in the Metro and tried to get it elsewhere, literally dismissing this engineer, this inventor, this man who has a proven track record as a technologist, and they are trying to dismiss him as a conspiracy theorist, but without pushing any evidence out into the public domain. It's simply, no, these LED street lights, they're completely safe. But there's actually no research to suggest that they're safe, whereas the available research suggests that the light frequencies pumped out by these LEDs are indeed harmful to life. But hey, it's cheaper than the traditional sodium lighting. In addition, it's the fact that it's white light, which contributes to massive disruption of sleep patterns. So, what's the link here? Well, the link between fracking, 5G, and the suppression of effective cancer treatments should be starting to catch up with you now. And over the last couple of days, I have mentioned the horrendous persecution of a couple who set up a manufacturing facility for GC meth, which is a proven effective cancer treatment, and in fact enabling some people to return to full health after following a course of GC meth of a live stream. Anyway, and following a course of GC meth and made a full recovery from stage 4 cancer, and yet the MHRA, the Medicines, Healthcare and Healthcare Regulatory Authority in the UK, absolutely has tried to prevent this treatment getting out into the public domain. So much so that they have forcibly shut down the manufacturing facilities, not just in the UK but elsewhere, and indeed actually raided a lady's house in Cyprus. A lady who was suffering from cancer, was taking a course of GC meth and was well on the way to recovery, and the police raided the house and removed all of her stock of GC meth, and guess what? She subsequently died. So Gerald Heddle, who is responsible for the enforcement of the Medicines Healthcare Regulatory Authority, has not only insisted that these laboratories get shut down in the UK, but anywhere where they can follow any lead of GC meth actually being sent to anywhere where the British government has any kind of influence, and they are effectively condemning those people to death. So, in the worst case scenario, I think we're going to stop fracking. I mean, I think we're in the last days of it. We've got to ramp up the efforts perhaps a bit more in some areas, but I think that fracking is a complete dead duck. But we've got to keep pushing until the lid on the coffin is absolutely nailed and it's buried. But 5G, the rollout is 2020, so we have something in the region of 2 years to raise awareness of the dangers associated with 5G. And of course, this isn't just the UK, it's all the way around the world. And Max Egan's presentation at AV9 at the weekend, he showed just how far 5G is being rolled out. So this is a global agenda to establish the Internet of Things, and the frequencies cause significant negative health impact, certainly neural damage and potentially cancer. So what are you left with? Well, if you could actually cure the cancer, that might be one thing, or treat it effectively with something like GC meth. But no, the establishment wants people just to continue to have to endure radio and or chemotherapy. And of course that's some £90,000 to Big Pharma every time somebody is signed up to a course of chemo or radiotherapy, whereas a course of GC meth is a fraction of that price. So please do your own research. But this is absolutely a time when people need to participate, and I actually think we need to change the vocabulary. This isn't about activism. I mean, obviously some people are, understandably, because they have the time perhaps and the real motivation, but they might be more active than others. But what we need is everybody to participate, and the choice is very simple, really. Now we're getting to the situation where either you participate or you are simply just an economic slave with no real interest in you know, what is being done, providing your life today is unaffected and maybe tomorrow, and you're not really too concerned about what happens next week. You're just going to sort of crack on with your normal routine. But fortunately, an increasing number of people are starting to realize that, you know, for the well-being not just of themselves but of future generations, they need to participate. So, you know, this is the fundamental choice now. Are we, individually and collectively, going to participate in the well-being of humanity, or are we going to passively sit back and just let the technologists do whatever it is they feel they can do in return for a quick buck? And you know, well, actually, you know, we'll just, you know, as long as we can switch on Coronation Street tonight or EastEnders, you know, whatever, then everything's great. As long as we can get down to the next match at Burnley Football Club or whatever, then everything's great. No, now is a time for fundamental decisions. Are you going to participate in the well-being and the longevity of humanity, or are you and those around you simply going to sit back and not participate and just, you know, suffer the consequences, whatever they might be? Well, that's of course exactly what the establishment wants. He wants you to sit back, he wants you to do nothing, doesn't even want you to vote. He would much rather you didn't vote, because that way then they can just claim, well, those people who did vote voted for us, and we can therefore roll out this agenda. And you know, please don't put under this video, you know, let's set up a petition, because petitions are a social safety valve. They are completely and utterly meaningless beyond maybe triggering a little bit of awareness, but that, you know, can be done in other ways. But the problem with petitions and even one-day protests is that it creates this psychological perception that you're actually doing something, that you are participating. No, you're not. You are simply giving away whatever power you may have with a signature on that petition. And that petition goes to wherever, goes to the local authority, it goes to maybe even 10 Downing Street. But as soon as it's taken off you and the door's closed, it's binned. It's a uniquely British institution. They have no value whatsoever. So instead of thinking, oh, I'm going to go and sign that petition, think about what you can do maybe that actually is a little bit more, requires a little bit more participation. So this is a call to participation. And, you know, let's change the vocabulary here. You know, we don't need to have any kind of apartheid between, you know, those who are activists and those who are not. Let's all be participants, because once we are all participating, the establishment has absolutely no idea how to deal with us. Now, in the short term, we have the people in the UK that took the initiative to establish GC-MAF manufacturing facilities. And these people can be credited with saving the lives of many, many hundreds, if not thousands of people, simply by making GC-MAF available. To those who could afford it, they paid for it. To those who couldn't afford it, it was provided for free. And in fact, there are many testimonies to that effect. You'll never hear the pharmaceutical industry offering to provide something for free unless it's on the basis that, well, you know, there's a bit of risk attached and you might just die. So we'll do it for free. Anything else, they want the return for, they want the revenue from. GC-MAF is a different ballgame. And yet the providers of this human protein are being persecuted. They run the risk of extradition. And as and when the court dates become available, I hope many others will publicise those court dates, and we can help to raise the awareness that since the 1939 Cancer Act, and I've had people contact me saying, Ian, you cannot be serious. Surely there's not a Cancer Act. Well, let me put this absolutely in perspective. It is effectively illegal for a medical practitioner to even suggest to you that by changing your diet, it might actually improve your chances of nailing a cancer or a tumour. The 1939 Cancer Act was put in place to protect the radium industry, and it's still in place today, and that is why, you know, Cancer Research UK is effectively a fraudulent charity. They're not interested in establishing a cure, because if there is a cure, then there's no need for the charity. And so people on the payroll have a vested interest in maintaining, you know, this fear of cancer, when, you know, they're beyond GC-MAF, there are other effective treatments as well. And apparently, you know, I even put myself at risk and anybody puts themselves at risk by claiming that there is a cure for cancer. So I'm not going to suggest that there's a cure, but there are certainly proven effective treatments. And Big Pharma has absolutely no desire whatsoever for you or me or anyone else to have access to those effective treatments. They want £90,000 for everyone that they can persuade to undergo chemo or radiotherapy. So fracking, 5G and the suppression of effective cancer treatments are inextricably interrelated. So do your own research and then decide whether or not you're going to participate, or you're going to sit back and let the global corporatists continue with their agenda of greed and total dominion, total control, and basically trying just to screw humanity. We're just collateral. They treat us as cattle. They absolutely believe that they are the rightful rulers of a fiefdom. And if you do the research in the definition of fiefdom, you will see that we are nothing more than cattle to these sociopathic parasites. So that's it from me today on the banks of the Liverpool-Leeds Canal here in East Lancashire. I'm heading over back to Missam Springs later today to help the guys on camp there prepare for the weekend's solidarity events. So if you're anywhere around North Nottinghamshire, then please, do come along and visit the camp at Missam Springs. And if you want to challenge me on anything that I'm sharing on these live streams, please come and do so. And we will sit down and we will look at the evidence. We will look at the scientific evidence that supports everything that I'm sharing with you. And if you're at the other end of Nottinghamshire, then you might be interested in an event that's being hosted at the Albert Hall in Nottingham. It's a massive venue where a number of medical professionals, including Dr. Graham Downing, who once again delivered a truly outstanding presentation over AV9, and these medical professionals will be sharing their insights into just how the NHS is being destroyed. So there's another angle here, isn't there? They know damn well that the negative health impacts are going to increase significantly if fracking and 5G actually are rolled out, and yet the healthcare system is being destroyed. Are you getting the picture yet?